Talk Radio.
Now, you have to say that even for the hapless Boris Johnson, the last few days really have been gold star level plankery. You know, the fact that he's now come out with this variant, which turns out to be yet another projection by the hapless Neil Ferguson, who was supposed to have resigned from the government after the last time he broke his own rules. He's now back in, apparently, with something called nerve tag. Let's talk to Peter Hitchens and make some sense of it all. Peter, very good morning to you.
Morning. Do you think there are enough planks in this government to make a scaffold?
Probably, but it would probably collapse as soon as you try to nail it together, because not one of them seems to have any kind of backbone of any kind, or any spine of any kind. How the hell does Neil Ferguson find his way back in after having resigned?
It's an interesting question, which I cannot actually answer. It's impossible, I think, for any sane, rational, or informed person to offer any other analysis of this government than it needs to be taken away.
Yeah.
Increasingly, urgently, by men in white coats. They have lost all sense of direction, of understanding what they're doing. They deliberately, again, resorted to the spreading of fear on Saturday, and they managed to spread fear beyond our shores into many, many other countries. And they, of course, didn't intend to do that. It's one of those great unintended consequences. But if you play with fire, don't be surprised if you burn your own house down. And the damage this has done, even if the countries involved eventually see sense and say, well, actually, we didn't really need to do that, the damage done to the value of the currency, to our standing in the world, is permanent.
Yes.
And and we will all have to live with it. And it's just an illustration of how completely unfit for their task these people are. And then remember also, the other really tricky thing about this is that it was announced, I think, it's impossible to prove this was deliberate, but it's very hard to believe that it wasn't. It was announced to make sure that it took place after Parliament had broken up for Christmas. And I think that's particularly disgraceful. If you remember all the great fuss that was made about Johnson proroguing Parliament a couple of years ago, this is far, far worse, in my view, than that, because here we have a government which is acting in an extra-parliamentary way, doing things it oughtn't to do, for which there is no real justification, which, if examined, collapsed into a sort of mist of dissolved blancmange. They don't make sense. And if you read Dr. John Lee in the Daily Mail this morning, an extremely good and acute article by somebody who knows what he's talking about, this whole business about the teenage mutant ninja virus is completely confected. If they'd been questioned by any competent journalists on Saturday, then it seems to me that they would have come under considerable strain, because they don't actually have the knowledge they claim to have.
No. And also this nerve tag operation. This nerve tag operation.
Nerve tag. Yes, what a great name.
I know, it's like something out of a James Bond film, isn't it? But they're riddled not just with so-called scientists. They're riddled with behavioural scientists, and the idea that somehow we are being taught all this and lectured at by these incredibly brilliant, scientific brains is nonsense. Half of them are psychologists.
Well, what they are experts at is hidden persuasion and frightening people. And I've many times pointed out, and it's still the pinned tweet on my Twitter account, the extraordinary words in the Sage document back in March, saying we need to frighten people more. And they have absolutely succeeded. If there's one thing this government has done, it's up the production of fear to unbelievably high levels. We lead the world in the production of fear. And fear, of course, makes people behave irrationally and convinces them that they have to do things which they would never previously have done. And on and on and on it goes. And when I say an angry Christmas, I mean this. Look, here's a comparison. You probably know I'm a cyclist, and I've been riding a bike in London for 40 years.
Yes.
And I have some sympathy with sensible provisions, cycle lanes, being able to ride in some of the royal parts if you take care and things like that. But I wasn't particularly impressed by the sudden outbreak of plastic poles and new extra-wide cycle lanes which infested the city a few weeks ago. An interesting thing, they were really unpopular. And they were unpopular with normal people, and they were unpopular with major celebrities. And do you know what I noticed this morning? They've almost all gone.
Yes. No, that's absolutely right.
Because people got angry. Now, I don't blame them for getting angry about that, but it's nothing like as serious as the robbery of personal freedom, the destruction of the economy, the wrecking of the National Health Service, the abandoning of thousands of people to needless deaths from cancer, heart disease, and the rest, and the increasing isolation of the old, and of course the growth in mental illness which will follow from this. It's nothing like as serious as that. Everybody got angry about a few plastic poles in the road Why can't they get angry about the destruction of civil society? Get angry, because if you don't get angry, it will never go away. People now say it'll go on till May, and I believe almost certainly this tier 4 will be extended to most of the rest of the country, certainly by the end of January, sooner. Almost certainly a tier 5 will be invented after that, with all kinds of, they'll probably try and make us wear muzzles in the street and confine us to our homes even more rigorously than they did last March. All this is coming. If you don't get angry, you'll never get out of it, because even if this virus, such as it is, ever vanishes, then another one will come along which will give them a pretext to do exactly the same thing. If you don't get angry, you are condemned to this for life. And so are your children. It will go on and on. You're handing people power they shouldn't have. And the only way to take it away from them is saying you don't deserve to have this power. You're abusing it, and it's dangerous. We want it back.
Absolutely.
You get rid of your cycle lanes. You can certainly, by anger and refusal to carry on putting up with this, you can get rid of this too.
Exactly right, because they've done everything they said they wouldn't do. I mean, almost every single pledge that Boris Johnson has made, he has then broken. And it seems now that from what we watched on Saturday, he's making sort of policy decisions and U-turns now, not every day, but sort of by the hour.
Yes, well, I think I've taken the view for some time that whenever he says something isn't going to happen, I should immediately make cautions for that to happen within a couple of days. You cannot rely on him at all. Everything he says is completely unreliable. So, yeah, and he has no basis on which to decide, because ultimately he's a showman. He's a comedian, and he doesn't actually have any core beliefs or understanding which would enable him to make rational decisions and stick to them. No.
But also we now learn, and David Rhodes, another colleague of yours at the Mail, has put out a tweet today with the documentation, with the meeting, the minutes of the meeting of this nerve tag mob and what they actually told the Prime Minister. And there is no evidence whatsoever that this new variant is any more infectious than the old one. Nothing at all to suggest that that's even true. All it is a future modelling scenario.
Again, they couldn't use the 40,000 people will die and huge snakes millions of miles long will be infesting the country line they used last time. So they had to come up with another scare that looked different. But as soon as I heard it, I was sure that within a couple of days it would dissolve under pressure, because there's nothing really there. That we're going through the normal crisis of winter respiratory diseases with a National Health Service with inadequate intensive care beds, because we've closed so many of them. That's all that's happening. It's bad if you're in the middle of it. It's bad if you're ill from it and dying from it. But it is not an excuse for destroying the country. Yet again, I say it because it sums it up so perfectly. The Prime Minister is like a man who discovers a wasp nest in his house and burns it down to get rid of the wasps. He has no sense of proportion, and nor does the government he controls. And why is it that so many people in my trade, so many people who are supposed to be skeptical, questioning, who surely went into the trade of journalism to do that and to question the abuse of power, why is it that they're so supine and naive and accepting of all this drivel? Isn't it time they remembered what it was they set out to do when they first took out the notebook and the pencil and started reporting? Because it really seems to me, if not, need to be replaced by people who are interested in journalism.
And who are interested in finding out what is actually guiding all of this nonsense, because the ridiculous lengths that some of the journalists went to before this weekend, when he last said that Christmas was not going to be cancelled and Christmas was going to be remaining the same because it would be inhuman to cancel it. He was actually asked by somebody from Sky TV who it will be responsible if somebody gives COVID to one of their elderly relatives over Christmas. I mean, what a stupid question.
Well, of course it's a stupid question, but the whole thing is based on a stupid misunderstanding of the limited power of humanity to control events, as Dr. Lee says in the Daily Mail this morning. The viruses are wind-borne. The idea that by the measures of this kind you can prevent them is similar, as I said last week, to trying to control the seasons. And the parallel I go with the running around sending the army out to stick the leaves back on the trees to say that autumn isn't taking place. It is ludicrous, but it is actually the truth. This is what they're trying to do by measures which have no effect on the actual virus at all, which have an enormous effect on those who have to knuckle down to them. They're trying to prevent something they have no control over, which at the beginning they admitted they couldn't control. but they've become drunk with power and also totally isolated. Again and again, my newspaper, the Mail on Sunday, calls for the advice given to the Prime Minister to be broadened, so that he's actually listened regularly to people such as Sunetra Gupta, an epidemiologist who doesn't hold the same views as the Imperial College mob. But this never happens. The number of people on the SAGE committee who know anything about actual hard science is not very great.
No.
And we're not here dealing with a huge army of incredibly experts. We're dealing with people whose record in prediction is extraordinarily bad and gets worse all the time. And why are they not replaced or at least diluted with people with better records? It doesn't happen because they don't want to know. They're now so completely trapped in this world of prejudice that they're angry if anybody comes into it and says, actually, you've got this wrong.
Right.
So they listen, they stick their fingers in their ears and they carry on. And they will do so until they question. So Parliament cannot obviously be recalled over Christmas itself, but it must be recalled immediately afterwards. And people must express, as I frequently say, their anger to their members of Parliament, that they're not being represented. We know there's now a substantial minority of MPs who have begun to listen. That substantial minority must become a majority of both parties, of people saying, we cannot go on like this any longer, or we will have no country, we will have no economy, we will have no national health service, we will have nothing to look forward to except decades and decades of this. MPs are the only people who can lawfully do anything about this. People say, well, all you can suggest is writing to my MP. Well, what do you want to do? Go out in the streets and riot? What good do you think that will do?
Well, that won't do any good at all.
This is a clear method which everybody has the power to pursue. And it just needs persistence and numbers and recruiting more people. Change every mind you can. Argue politely, but argue firmly. Change every mind you can. Spread the idea, because it has spread since March quite a bit, that this is all folly.
Yes.
And then make sure that
our
Parliament does something about it.
Wouldn't it also be useful, Peter, if the opposition could actually start banging a few drums and making some noise about recalling Parliament, which Keir Starmer isn't doing? Instead, he's launching his new sort of vision for the future about devolution today. He's not even considering having a go at the Prime Minister and saying, why the hell are you not inviting us back into Parliament?
Well, what Keir Starmer is plainly doing is trying to set up the basis of a future coalition with the SNP. And his main concern is entirely getting into office rather than the state of the country, which is in its way despicable. When I belonged to the Labour Party, which I did, my view was that the whole purpose of it was to represent the people of this country who didn't have all the advantages. And these are the people who are suffering most from this. Where is the Labour Party in representing its own, the people who actually have to work hard for a living, who have no shares, who have no portfolios, who don't have big fat houses, who just live from day to day on what they can get working hard? Why is the Labour Party not representing them? And if it won't, isn't it time somebody else did? And isn't it time those people in the Labour Party who still believe in that actually rebelled against this, a leader who seems to be determined to impoverish his own voters?
Well, it's absolutely extraordinary stuff, isn't it? And yet, they will say, of course, that, and they may have taken it a step too far now, looking at the rest of the world and how the rest of the world is now banning anyone from Britain going to their countries. They will always say, well, everybody's doing it. You know, go to Germany, you can't have a Christmas there. You go to France, you have to get a letter to go outside. Go to Italy, where you're not allowed to meet anybody outside of your own family bubble. And I mean, they're not wrong about that, but I mean, everybody's doing it.
Well, it's true, but when I was growing up, people in this country were proud of the fact that we were different in so many ways. They were proud of the freedoms deriving from Magna Carta. They were proud of jury trial and the presumption of innocence. They were proud of the fact that we had an unarmed police force which policed by consent. And no one said, oh, well, everybody else does it a different way. Everywhere else they can fling you into jail without any evidence. So let's do that. If everybody else is doing something stupid, why follow them? The crowds are not necessarily right. In fact, in general, I think history shows that majorities are pretty certainly wrong over the long term. And also beliefs are wrong too. Medical beliefs are wrong. For some time, doctors believed that barbiturates were a useful medicine. They believed that lobotomies were a good way of treating people who were mentally ill. In fact, the man who invented lobotomies got a Nobel Prize. When my first child was born, the advice we were given by doctors was to put the baby on her front because it was safer. Only, 2 or 3 years later did they say, "Oh, sorry, we got that wrong. It's incredibly dangerous to
Right.
put your baby on her front. You should have put her on her back, you
Right.
silly fool."
Exactly.
They were the ones with the advice, leaving aside the doctor who nearly condemned me to an extremely painful and unpleasant operation by prescribing me the wrong antibiotic. These people are often wrong. Consensuses are often wrong. And the whole business of people following the consensus, of joining conventional wisdom and turning that into a prejudice, has closed so many minds. Where are the proper academics? There's so few of them standing up against this. Why are they all so gutless? They must know in their hearts that this is baloney. So why won't they say so? The longer it goes on, the more we will be reduced at the end of it, not to a third world state, impoverished, unfree, and increasingly miserable. And it really is time to get angry about it. Not just about the bike lanes, get angry about the destruction of your country.
Yeah. But I mean, this is the problem that we currently have, because we have this kind of, government by almost civil service convention. It's no longer, David Mellor was on the breakfast show this morning, and I have no great admiration for David Mellor. But when you listen to somebody like him talking about the paucity of talent in this particular cabinet, you can't help but agree with him. And when you think back to previous governments, they did have, some genuinely independently, incredibly brilliant people.
Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? I mean, David Mellor is not as bad as he looks, as they say. I always thought that there was some intelligence there, but the fact is that a government so bad that it makes you nostalgic for the Thatcher and May.
I know.
Must be bad. And this Hancockio character who announces on Sunday that we've lost control of the virus. You never had control of the virus, mate. No. You had nothing to lose in that. But this extraordinarily useless person stays in position because he's part of our Etonian Napoleon Johnson's inner core, and the basis of Johnson's politics is the Corleone family. If someone is loyal to Johnson, then however awful they are, they continue in office because they've been loyal. That's all there is to it. It's, as I said, it's a mixture of Napoleon and Corleone, this government.
Yeah, it is, and it's none of the good things from either, unfortunately. Because I mean, there are some admirable things that you could point to.
Don't get carried away.
Just fine, because this is our last encounter for this year, because I'm off after tomorrow to try and have some form of Christmas. I just want to say thank you for all of the conversations we've had. As you say, we didn't start off agreeing, but we have ended up agreeing on almost everything. And I'm just very glad that we met on Twitter many years after we used to work in the same office.
Well, quite. And may I say in return, thank you for all these conversations, and also for the extraordinary demonstration that you gave at the beginning of this, that it is possible and indeed necessary for intelligent people to change their minds when the facts change, and had the guts to do so. And if other people would have the same guts that you had, this country would be a whole lot better off. I can't wish you a happy Christmas, but I can wish you an angrily happy Christmas, if that will do.
That will definitely do.
I hope to see you in the coming year.
Yes, and as many people have said to us, please keep going, because I think we'll get there in the end. I know it's a long and very dangerous, difficult, arduous road, but we'll have to get there in the end.
Well, one has to hope so. I tell you what, there is only one thing to do when you're up against stupidity of this nature, and that is to keep fighting it with every bit of nerve and gristle you have. Whatever your right hand finds to do it with all your might. And this is what we should be doing, fighting it. So it's the most important thing either of us, I suspect, have ever done in our life.
I think you're absolutely right. Peter Hitchens, thank you very much indeed. We'll see you next year. Peter Hitchens, columnist at the Mail on Sunday, a man who has been absolutely steadfast in his belief that this government is barking up the wrong tree, driving down the wrong road, taking us over a cliff edge, all of those analogies which couldn't be more correct now than they ever were. Absolutely unbelievable stuff. We'll be talking to Peter, of course, again when I'm back. I'm in tomorrow, but then I'm off until the new year.